The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty church, and Theresa Collins stepped down into the Texas heat with her white dress already clinging to her skin, only to see a lone cowboy standing beside a mound of fresh earth crowned with a simple wooden cross. The man removed his hat, revealing sun-darkened hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered beyond his years, and when he looked at her, something flickered across his features that might have been grief or guilt or both. "You must be Theresa," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "I'm Tobias Whitmore. Thomas was my brother." The words hit her like a physical blow. She had traveled 3 weeks from Kansas City to Del Rio, Texas, carrying nothing but 2 carpetbags and a packet of letters written in careful, earnest script. Letters from a man named Thomas Whitmore who had promised her a home, a future, a love built slowly through words on paper. Now this stranger stood before her, hat in hand, telling her that the man she had come to marry was under 6 feet of Texas dirt. "When?" she managed to ask, though her throat felt tight. "4 days ago. Horse threw him, broke his neck. It was quick." Tobias shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I sent a telegram to Kansas City, but I reckon you were already on the road." Theresa looked at the grave, at the fresh earth that had not yet settled, at the cross with Thomas's name carved into it. She had never met him in person, had only his photograph and his words, but she had built a life in her mind around those letters. Now that life was buried in the ground before her. "I am sorry for your loss," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt, "and for my intrusion. If you could direct me to a boarding house, I will make arrangements to return home." "Home?" Tobias's brow furrowed. "You mean Kansas City? I have nowhere else." He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes taking in her travel-worn dress, her determined posture, the way she held herself together despite the shock. Then he did something that surprised them both. He put his hat back on and said, "Thomas made you promises. He promised you a home here, a place on this ranch, a future. I aim to honor what he promised." She stared at him. "I do not understand. My brother was a good man. He would not have asked you to come all this way if he did not mean to give you everything he said he would. He is gone, but his words should still mean something. His promises should still stand." Tobias cleared his throat. "I am offering to marry you in his place, to give you the life he promised. You cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious, Miss Collins. We have a ranch that needs running. You need a home. Thomas wanted you here, and I will not let his death make a liar of him." Theresa felt the world tilt sideways. This was madness. She had come here to marry a man she had corresponded with for 8 months, a man who had written about poetry and sunsets and his dreams for the future. This man before her was a stranger, offering marriage like it was a business transaction, standing beside his brother's grave as if that made it all reasonable. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course." Tobias gestured toward a buckboard wagon hitched nearby. "I will take you into town. The boarding house is run by Mrs. Patterson. She is a good woman. You can stay there while you decide." The ride into Del Rio was conducted in near silence. Theresa sat stiffly beside Tobias, acutely aware of the solid warmth of him, the way his hands held the reins with easy confidence, the muscle that ticked in his jaw. The town itself was small but thriving, situated near the Rio Grande with its main street lined with businesses that catered to ranchers and travelers alike. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a plump woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a kind smile. She showed Theresa to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor and brought her tea and bread without being asked. "I heard about Thomas," she said gently. "The whole town is grieving. He was well loved." "I never met him," Theresa admitted. We only corresponded. Ah, a mail-order arrangement. Those can be tricky. Mrs. Patterson poured the tea. But Thomas Whitmore was as good as they come. If he chose you, he chose well. And his brother Tobias, he is cut from the same cloth, even if he hides it better. He asked me to marry him, in Thomas's place, Mrs. Patterson did not look surprised. That sounds like something Tobias would do. He is a man who believes in honoring debts and keeping promises, takes responsibility for things even when they are not his fault. She paused. Their parents died when the boys were young. Tobias raised Thomas himself, gave up a lot to do it. Thomas's death hit him hard. After Mrs. Patterson left, Theresa sat by the window and watched the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She took out Thomas's letters and read them again, trying to reconcile the gentle words on paper with the reality of his absence. He had written about the ranch, about the wildflowers that bloomed in spring, about wanting a partner to share his life with. He had seemed kind and thoughtful, a man who noticed beauty in small things. Now he was gone, and his brother was offering to take his place. She could return to Kansas City. Her position as a seamstress was likely filled by now, and her boarding house room certainly was, but she could start again. She had done it before. Or she could stay here, marry a stranger, and try to build something from the ashes of what should have been. The next morning, Theresa dressed carefully and asked Mrs. Patterson for directions to the Whitmore ranch. It was only 3 miles out of town, Mrs. Patterson said. An easy walk in the cooler morning air. Theresa needed to see it, to understand what Thomas had promised her before she could make any decision. The ranch house came into view after about an hour of walking. It was larger than she had expected, a solid structure of wood and stone with a wide porch and windows that caught the morning light. Corrals spread out behind it, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. It was beautiful in a stark, practical way, the kind of place that spoke of hard work and careful planning. Tobias emerged from the barn as she approached, surprise evident on his face. "Miss Collins, I did not expect you." "I needed to see it," she said. "The place Thomas wrote about." He nodded slowly. "Would you like a tour?" She followed him through the ranch, listening as he explained the operation in short, efficient sentences. They raised cattle primarily, but also kept horses. The ranch employed 3 hands who lived in the bunkhouse. There were 200 acres, most of it grazing land with a creek that ran year-round. Thomas had been planning to expand, Tobias said, to buy the adjacent property and increase the herd. He was always thinking ahead, Tobias said, and for the first time, emotion crept into his voice. Always planning for the future. "A future that included me," Theresa said quietly. "Yes." They stood in the barn, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that came through the gaps in the boards. A horse nickered softly in one of the stalls. "Why would you do this?" Theresa asked. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Tobias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was choosing each one with care. "Thomas was everything good that I am not. He was kind and gentle, and he saw beauty in things. He deserved happiness, and he thought he would find it with you. I could not save him from that damned horse, but I can still give him this. I can make sure his promises were not empty. That is not a reason to marry someone. Maybe not," he met her eyes, "but it is a start. And I have learned that most good things start from unexpected places." "What would you expect from such a marriage?" she asked, needing to know the practical details even as her heart raced. "I would expect you to help run the household, to be a partner in the ranch. To be honest with me, even when the truth is hard." He paused. "I would give you your own room, at least at first. I would not force anything on you. Whatever else grew between us would have to grow natural in its own time. And if nothing grew, then at least you would have a home and security. And I would have honored my brother's word. It was insane. It was the most practical insanity Theresa had ever encountered. But as she stood there in the barn, looking at this serious, weathered man who was trying to make right something that could never truly be made right, she found herself considering it. "I need more time," she said. "Take all you need. The offer stands." She stayed in Del Rio for a week, working with Mrs. Patterson to help with mending and sewing to pay for her room. She met the townspeople, went to church on Sunday, and tried to get a sense of the community Thomas had wanted her to join. Everyone spoke well of the Whitmore brothers. Thomas had been beloved for his kindness and easy smile. Tobias was respected for his fairness and hard work, though people noted he kept more to himself. On the 8th day, Theresa walked back out to the ranch. She found Tobias working on repairing a section of fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat dampening his collar despite the morning hour. "I have made my decision," she said without preamble. He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants, his expression carefully neutral. "And I will marry you, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to learn everything about running this ranch. I want to be a true partner, not just a housekeeper. I want honesty between us always. And I want time, real time, to grieve what I have lost and to figure out who we might be to each other." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "Anything else?" "Yes, I want you to tell me about Thomas, about who he really was, not just the words he wrote in letters. I want to understand the man I came here to marry, and I want you to help me do that." Something shifted in Tobias's face, a crack in the careful control he maintained. "That might be harder than you think." "I know, but I need it anyway." They were married 3 days later in the small church where Thomas's funeral had been held. The ceremony was simple and quick, attended only by Mrs. Patterson and the ranch hands. Theresa wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric purchased at the general store, a soft blue that Mrs. Patterson said brought out her eyes. Tobias wore a clean shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Tobias kissed her cheek gently, his lips barely brushing her skin. It was chaste and careful, a promise of patience. They drove back to the ranch in the buckboard, Theresa's few possessions loaded in the back. The house was clean but sparse, clearly the domain of men who cared more for function than comfort. Tobias showed her to a bedroom at the front of the house with windows facing east. "This was going to be your room anyway," he said. "Thomas had me fix it up when he knew you were coming. New mattress, new curtains. He wanted you to feel welcome." Theresa looked around at the simple furniture, the crisp white curtains, the quilt folded at the foot of the bed. Thomas had prepared this space for her, had imagined her in it, and now she was here because his brother had a sense of duty that ran deeper than most people's capacity for love. "Thank you," she said softly. "My room is at the back of the house. There is a lock on your door if you want it." "I do not think I will need it." He nodded and left her to settle in. The first weeks of marriage were strange and careful. They moved around each other like dancers learning a new pattern, polite and considerate and achingly formal. Theresa learned the rhythms of the ranch, rising before dawn to make breakfast for Tobias and the hands, spending her days cleaning and cooking and learning the account books. Tobias taught her about the cattle, about reading the land and the weather, about the 1,000 small things that went into running a successful ranch. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked. Slowly, haltingly, Tobias began to tell her about Thomas. "He was 12 years younger than me," Tobias said one night, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Our mother died when he was born, and our father followed her 6 years later. I was 18, barely more than a boy myself, but I could not let them take Thomas to some orphanage. So I lied about my age, convinced the judge I was 21 and took responsibility for him. That must have been difficult. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Thomas was all I had left of our family. He was quiet for a moment. I was not always good at it. I was too strict sometimes, too focused on survival to remember he was just a kid. But he never held it against me. He just kept being himself, kept finding joy in things even when times were hard. He sounds wonderful. He was better than me in every way that mattered. There was no bitterness in Tobias's voice, just simple truth. He should have been the one to live, to have a wife and children and a happy life. The world needs more men like Thomas and fewer like me. I do not believe that, Theresa said firmly. The world needs men who keep their promises and honor their commitments. The world needs men like you too. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them that was not quite friendship but might someday become it. As summer deepened into August, Theresa found herself settling into life on the ranch in ways she had not expected. She learned to ride, sitting astride rather than side saddle despite the scandal it might have caused back in Kansas City. She learned to read the sky for storms, to spot a lame cow from a distance, to calculate feed costs and profit margins. Tobias was a patient teacher, never condescending, always willing to explain things as many times as she needed. The ranch hands treated her with respect that gradually warmed into genuine affection. There was old Miguel, who had worked for Tobias's father and taught both boys to rope. Young Danny, barely 20, who blushed whenever she spoke to him. And quiet Samuel, a freed slave who had drifted west after the war and found a home on the Whitmore ranch. "Boss treats us fair," Samuel told her one day while she brought water out to the men working on a new fence line. "Pays on time, never cheats us. We would ride through hell for him." "He is a good man," Theresa agreed, and realized as she said it that she meant it. But it was the nights on the porch that meant the most. That was when Tobias opened up, slowly sharing pieces of himself along with stories about Thomas. He told her about teaching Thomas to ride, about the time Thomas convinced him to spend a whole day just lying in the grass watching clouds, about Thomas's terrible cooking and beautiful singing voice. "He used to sing in the evenings," Tobias said. "Old hymns mostly, but sometimes songs he made up himself. The house has been too quiet without it." "Sing something for me," Theresa said impulsively. "I cannot sing worth a damn. I do not care, please." So Tobias, his voice rough and uncertain, sang a few lines of an old hymn Thomas had loved. He was right that he could not sing well, but there was something achingly beautiful in the effort, in this stoic man trying to keep his brother's memory alive through fumbling notes. When he finished, Theresa found tears on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are crying. I am grieving. For Thomas, for what might have been, but also for you, for what you have lost." She reached out and took his hand, the first time she had initiated touch between them. "You loved him very much. He was my whole family." Tobias's hand tightened around hers. "And now I have you, and I do not know what to do with that. I do not know how to be a husband, Theresa. I only know how to be a brother and a rancher. Then we will figure it out together. We will learn to be married the same way I learned to ride and manage accounts, one day at a time." That night marked a shift between them. They were still careful with each other, still sleeping in separate rooms, but there was a new ease in their interactions. Tobias started leaving wildflowers on the kitchen table, never saying where they came from but always choosing the prettiest ones he could find. Theresa started mending his clothes with extra care, adding small decorative touches that made him pause and run his fingers over the neat stitching. They were building something, slowly and carefully, from foundations made of grief and duty and an unexpected tenderness that surprised them both. In September, a drought threatened the region. The creek that ran through their property slowed to a trickle, and the grass turned brown and brittle. Tobias grew tense and quiet, spending long hours riding the property lines, checking the water sources, making difficult decisions about which cattle to sell early. Theresa accompanied him on one of these rides, her seat on her mare now confident and easy. They rode in silence for a long time before Tobias finally spoke. "I am going to have to sell off a quarter of the herd, maybe more if the drought continues. It will set us back years. What can I do to help? You already help more than you know." He pulled his horse to a stop on a rise overlooking the ranch. "When Thomas died, I thought about selling the whole thing, just giving up. The ranch was his dream more than mine. I only kept it going for him. And now I have something to fight for again, someone counting on me." He looked at her, his gray eyes intense. "You have given me a reason to keep going, Theresa. I want you to know that." She felt her breath catch. They had been married for months now, living as partners and tentative friends, but this felt like something more. This felt like the beginning of what she had come to Texas hoping to find. "I am glad I stayed," she said. "Even though everything turned out so differently than I planned, I am glad I am here with you." They sat on their horses on that wind-swept hill. The ranch spread below them, and Theresa felt something shift in her heart. She had come here to marry Thomas, had mourned him without ever knowing him. But this man beside her, this serious, dutiful, unexpectedly gentle man, was becoming real to her in ways Thomas's letters never could have achieved. The drought broke in October with storms that rolled in from the Gulf, drenching the parched land in warm rain. Theresa stood on the porch and watched the water pour from the sky, laughing with pure relief. Tobias came running from the barn, already soaked through, and swept her up in an impulsive hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "We are saved," he said, spinning her once before setting her down, his hands lingering at her waist. They stood there in the rain, both of them drenched and grinning like fools, and then Tobias was kissing her. Not the careful peck from their wedding day, but a real kiss, deep and searching and full of months of pent-up feeling. Theresa kissed him back, her hands fisting in his wet shirt, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tobias touched his forehead to hers. "I am sorry. I should have asked permission." "Do not you dare apologize," Theresa said fiercely. "Do not you dare. I do not want this to just be about honoring Thomas's promises anymore," Tobias said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I want this to be real. I want you to be my wife in truth, not just in name. I am falling in love with you, Theresa, and I do not know how to tell you except to just say it plain. Then I will say it plain too. I am falling in love with you, Tobias Whitmore. You are not your brother, and I am grateful for that because I want you, not a memory or a might have been. I want this stubborn, serious, secretly tender man who leaves me flowers and teaches me about cattle and sings off-key to keep his brother's memory alive." He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "Come inside with me. Be my wife in truth." They made love that night with the rain drumming on the roof, tentative at first and then with growing confidence as they learned each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's minds over the past months. Tobias was gentle and careful, always watching her face to make sure she was comfortable, and Theresa discovered a passion in herself she had not known existed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Tobias's bed, which was now their bed, and talked until dawn. "I felt guilty," Tobias admitted. "For wanting you. You were supposed to be Thomas's. I was never Thomas's. I was always my own. and I choose to be yours now, not because of duty or promises, but because of who we have become together." "I wish he could have known you," Tobias said. "He would have loved you." "I wish I could have known him too, but I am grateful for where we are now, even with all the pain it took to get here." They fell asleep as the first light crept through the windows, wrapped in each other's arms, finally allowing themselves to be happy. The following months brought a deepening of everything between them. They worked side by side during the day and fell into bed together at night, both of them marveling at how naturally they fit together. The ranch prospered with the return of rain, the grass growing green and thick, the cattle fattening up nicely for market. In December, Theresa realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure before telling Tobias, finding him in the barn one evening as he finished the day's chores. "I am with child," she said simply. He froze, the brush he had been using on his horse hanging forgotten in his hand. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be." "The baby should come sometime in the summer." Tobias set down the brush carefully and came to her, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that still surprised her even after months of marriage. "How do you feel about this?" Terrified, happy, overwhelmed. She covered his hands with hers. "How do you feel?" "The same, all of those things." He pulled her close, one hand moving to rest on her still flat belly. "I never thought I would be a father. I never thought I deserved it. You will be wonderful at it. You raised Thomas after all." "That was different. I was barely keeping us alive. This time I want to do it right. I want our children to have everything I could not give Thomas." "Our children," Theresa repeated, loving the sound of it. "You think there will be more than one? I hope so, if you are willing." She kissed him, pouring all her love and trust into it. "I am willing." The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Tobias hovered anxiously, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, adjusting her pillows, reading to her in the evenings when she was too tired to do anything but rest. He took over more of the household chores, insisting she conserve her strength. "I am not made of glass," she protested one day in March when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but you are carrying something precious and I will not risk it. Or you." His protectiveness sometimes frustrated her, but it also touched her deeply. This man who had seemed so stoic and closed off when they first met had revealed himself to be capable of profound tenderness. In April, they made the trip into Del Rio to see the doctor, who confirmed that Theresa was healthy and the baby was growing well. Mrs. Patterson threw an impromptu celebration at the boarding house, inviting half the town's women to shower Theresa with advice and hand-sewn baby clothes. "You have done well for yourself," Mrs. Patterson said, watching Tobias through the window as he waited patiently outside with the other husbands. "That man adores you." "I adore him too," Theresa said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The baby came on a scorching day in late July, after 18 hours of labor that left Theresa exhausted and Tobias pacing holes in the porch. The midwife finally emerged to tell him he had a son, healthy and squalling and perfect. Tobias entered the bedroom to find Theresa propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, cradling a tiny bundle. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "Meet your son," she said, her voice tired but radiant. He approached carefully as if the baby might break and looked down at the small, red face. The infant had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in indignation at being born. "He is perfect," Tobias whispered. "You are perfect. We want to name him Thomas," Theresa said. "After your brother, if that is all right with you." Tobias felt his throat close up. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he found his voice again, it was rough with emotion. "Thomas would have been honored. I am honored." Thomas Miguel Whitmore, Theresa said, including the ranch hand who had become like family to them. Tommy for short. Tobias carefully took his son, settling the warm weight of him in his arms with wonder. The baby stopped fussing and blinked up at him with unfocused eyes, and Tobias felt something crack open in his chest, a wellspring of love so intense it almost hurt. "I will protect you," he promised his son. "I will teach you to be strong and kind. I will give you everything I could not give the uncle you are named for." "You will teach him together," Theresa corrected gently. "We are partners in this, remember, always," Tobias agreed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "We are partners in everything." Young Tommy proved to be a good baby, healthy and curious and blessed with his mother's sunny disposition. Tobias was a devoted father, often found walking the porch at night with the baby against his shoulder, pointing out stars and telling stories about the Uncle Tommy would never meet. "Your Uncle Thomas would have spoiled you rotten," Tobias said one night, his voice carrying through the open window to where Theresa sat mending. "He had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. You are named after a good man, son. I hope you grow up to be like him." Theresa smiled as she listened, her heart full. They had built something beautiful from the wreckage of loss, had created a family from duty and grief and unexpected love. It was not the life she had planned when she stepped off that stagecoach nearly 2 years ago, but it was a good life, a true life, and she would not trade it for anything. The ranch continued to prosper. With Theresa's careful management of the accounts and Tobias's skill with the land and cattle, they were able to expand as Thomas had always dreamed. They bought the adjacent property, increasing their acreage, and hired 2 more hands to help with the growing operation. Tommy grew from baby to toddler, learning to walk holding onto his father's hands, learning his first words while sitting on his mother's lap. He was a happy child, quick to laugh and endlessly curious about everything around him. Tobias built him a small rocking horse, carving it carefully in the evenings, and Tommy rode it with fierce determination, already imagining himself a real cowboy. In the spring of Tommy's 2nd year, Theresa discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. She continued to work alongside Tobias for most of the pregnancy, only slowing down in the final weeks. Their 2nd child, a daughter, was born on a crisp October morning. She came into the world quietly, with watchful eyes that seemed to take in everything, and they named her Grace Ellen, after both their mothers. "Now we have our set," Tobias said, holding his daughter while Tommy climbed up on the bed to inspect his new sister with intense interest. "Our set?" Theresa laughed. "What makes you think we are stopping at 2? Are we not? I rather like being a mother, and you are quite good at being a father. I think we could manage a few more if God sees fit to bless us." Tobias kissed her, careful of the baby between them. "Then we will see what the future brings." The future brought prosperity and challenges in equal measure. A hard winter when they lost some cattle, but the family stayed warm and safe. A wet spring that threatened flooding but ultimately brought abundant grass. A summer drought that they weathered better than their neighbors because of careful water management. Through it all, Tobias and Theresa worked as true partners, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating victories as a team. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, already learning to ride and rope at an age when most children were still learning their letters. Grace proved to be quieter but equally determined, with her mother's head for numbers and her father's patience. She would sit with Theresa in the evenings, carefully practicing her sums while Tommy played with toy horses at their feet. When Tommy was 6 and Grace was 4, another son joined the family. They named him Daniel James, and he proved to be the most mischievous of the three, always finding trouble with a smile that made it impossible to stay angry at him. 3 children, Tobias said one evening, watching his brood play in the yard while he and Theresa sat on the porch. "When did we become such a large family?" "When we decided to build a life together," Theresa said, leaning against his shoulder. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a single moment." He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Sometimes I think about that day you arrived, standing by Thomas's grave in your white dress, looking so lost. I never imagined we would end up here. Neither did I. But I am grateful for every step that brought us to this place." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun set over the ranch. Tommy was teaching Grace to rope a fence post while Daniel toddled after them, trying to help. It was a scene of such ordinary domestic happiness that it made Theresa's heart ache with love. "I think about Thomas sometimes," she admitted. "Wonder what he would think of all this. I know he would be happy for us. He always wanted me to find someone to have a family of my own. He used to worry that I would end up alone." Tobias was quiet for a moment. "I still miss him." "I suppose I always will." "Of course you will. He was your brother, your family. Missing him does not diminish what we have built." "No," Tobias agreed. "If anything, what we have built honors his memory. He brought you here, even if he could not be here to receive you. In a way, he gave us to each other." Theresa turned to look at him, this man she had married out of duty and learned to love with her whole heart. His face was weathered from years in the Texas sun, his hands calloused from hard work, but his eyes were soft when they looked at her, full of a love that had grown deeper with every passing year. "I love you," she said, needing him to hear it. "I love you too," he replied, and kissed her as their children's laughter rang out across the ranch. Years passed in the way they do when life is full and good. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Tobias and Theresa grew old together with the kind of contentment that comes from building something lasting. They added a 4th child, another daughter named Sarah Catherine, who inherited her father's quiet strength and her mother's fierce intelligence. Tommy became the kind of young man his Uncle Thomas had been, kind and thoughtful with an easy smile and a gift for making friends. He took naturally to ranch work, but also loved books and learning, spending his evenings reading by lamplight when the day's work was done. At 20, he married a schoolteacher from San Antonio, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, beginning the next generation of Whitmores on the land. Grace grew into a formidable woman who had no interest in marriage, instead throwing herself into managing the ranch's business affairs with a skill that surpassed even her mother's. She expanded their operations, negotiating contracts with buyers across Texas and even into Mexico, earning a reputation as shrewd but scrupulously fair. Daniel proved to be a wanderer, spending several years exploring the territories before finally settling in Colorado, where he wrote long letters home describing the mountains and mining towns with such vivid detail that Theresa could picture every scene. He visited when he could, always bringing stories and laughter with him. Young Sarah, the baby of the family, surprised everyone by becoming a doctor. She studied in the East, one of the few women accepted into medical school, and returned to Del Rio to set up a practice that served ranchers and townspeople alike. She never married, claiming she was too busy saving lives to bother with romance, but she was deeply loved by everyone who knew her. Through it all, Tobias and Theresa remained the heart of the family. They were the ones everyone came home to, the steady center around which the family orbited. The ranch house was always full of grandchildren in the summers, and Tobias proved to be as devoted a grandfather as he had been a father, teaching the next generation to ride and rope and respect the land. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Tobias took Theresa back to the spot where they had first ridden together during the drought. The ranch had grown immensely since then, but this hilltop remained the same, offering a view of everything they had built together. "Do you remember standing here and telling me I had given you a reason to keep going?" Theresa asked. "I remember. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You saved me, Theresa. I was lost after Thomas died, just going through the motions. You gave me purpose and joy and a family. You gave me everything." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I came here with nothing but broken dreams and a suitcase. You gave me a home and a partnership and a love I never expected to find. We built this together." He pulled her close, and they stood there on the hill, watching the sun set over the ranch as they had done countless times before. The land stretched out before them, dotted with cattle and marked by the houses of their children, a testament to everything they had created. "Happy anniversary, wife," Tobias said. "Happy anniversary, husband," Theresa replied, and kissed him with all the love of 20 years together and the promise of many more to come. As they grew older, they began to slow down, gradually turning over more of the ranch's operations to Grace and Tommy. Tobias's hair went completely gray, and his joints ached on cold mornings, but his eyes still lit up when Theresa entered a room. Theresa's hands developed arthritis that made sewing difficult, but she still managed the account books with precision and kept the house running smoothly. They spent more time on the porch, watching their grandchildren play, telling stories about the old days. Tommy's children loved to hear about how their grandmother had arrived to marry a man she had never met, only to find him buried and marry his brother instead. "That is so romantic," Tommy's eldest daughter sighed. "It was terrifying at the time," Theresa said with a laugh. "But yes, I suppose it turned out to be romantic in the end." "Tell us about Uncle Thomas," one of the younger grandchildren asked. "The one Daddy is named after." Tobias settled back in his chair, Theresa's hand in his, and told the stories he had told so many times before. About Thomas's kindness and his singing voice and his dreams for the ranch. About how much he had wanted a family and how he had chosen Theresa sight unseen because her letters had shown him a kindred spirit. "He was a good man," Tobias concluded, "and I miss him still. But I am grateful for what his life and his death brought me. Without him, I never would have had your grandmother, and without her, none of you would be here. So in a way, Thomas gave me all of you." The grandchildren absorbed this solemnly, understanding in the way children do that they were part of a story bigger than themselves. When Tobias was 72 and Theresa was 68, he fell ill with pneumonia. Despite Sarah's best efforts, he grew weaker, his breathing labored and his strength fading. The family gathered, coming from across Texas and beyond to say their goodbyes, but Tobias rallied, as stubborn in illness as he had been in health. After 2 weeks of fierce fighting, he turned the corner, his fever breaking and his breathing easing. Sarah declared it a miracle, though Tobias insisted he simply was not ready to leave yet. "I have more time with you," he told Theresa, gripping her hand from his sick. "I am not done loving you yet." "You will never be done loving me," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "Even death will not stop it, but I am grateful to have you here a while longer." He recovered slowly, never quite regaining all his strength, but improving enough to resume a quieter version of his life. He could not ride anymore, could not do the hard physical labor of the ranch, but he could sit on the porch and offer advice, could hold his great-grandchildren when they visited, could fall asleep each night with Theresa in his arms. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The house overflowed with family, 3 generations gathered to honor the couple at the heart of it all. Tommy gave a toast, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke about his parents' love and sacrifice and the legacy they had built. "You showed us what it means to honor your word," Tommy said. "What it means to build something lasting from difficult circumstances. What it means to love someone with your whole heart, every single day. Thank you for being the foundation on which all of us stand." Tobias stood, his hand shaking slightly as he raised his glass. "I only did what needed doing. I honored my brother's promise and found myself blessed beyond measure. Your mother is the true hero of this story. She took a chance on a stubborn cowboy and made him into a better man. Everything good in my life comes from her, and everything good in mine comes from you," Theresa said, standing beside him. "We built this together, all of it. Every acre of land, every child and grandchild, every year of happiness. Together." They kissed to enthusiastic applause from their family, and Theresa thought about how far they had come from that awful day by the fresh grave. How duty had turned to respect, respect to friendship, friendship to love, and love to this overwhelming abundance of family and joy. More years passed, gentle and slow. They celebrated the birth of great-great-grandchildren, attended weddings and graduations, and watched the ranch continue to thrive under Grace and Tommy's management. The world changed around them, new technologies and new ideas sweeping through Texas, but the core of their life remained constant. On a warm spring evening, when Tobias was 78 and Theresa was 74, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The sun was setting in shades of gold and pink, and the air smelled of wildflowers and fresh grass. "Do you remember the first time we sat here together?" Tobias asked. "When you asked me to tell you about Thomas, I remember. I was so scared and lost, trying to figure out who you were and what I had gotten myself into. And now I know exactly who you are. You are the best man I have ever known, Tobias Whitmore. You are my husband, my partner, the father of my children, and the love of my life. You are home." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "I never thought I deserved happiness. I thought I was meant to just work and survive and make sure Thomas had a good life. I never imagined I could have all this. We both found more than we imagined. I came here to marry a kind man who wrote pretty letters, and instead, I married a good man who showed me what real love looks like. Not the easy romance of words on paper, but the hard, beautiful work of building a life together. No regrets," he asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not have more years to spend with you. I could live 1,000 lifetimes and never get tired of loving you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear Grace moving around the kitchen, preparing supper. She had moved back into the main house to help care for them as they aged, and her presence was a comfort. "I love you," Theresa said, the words as natural as breathing after so many years. "I love you too," Tobias replied, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They remained on the porch until full dark, two old people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and built something extraordinary. The ranch stretched out around them in the darkness, full of the sounds of cattle and crickets and the whisper of wind through grass. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Rio Grande flowed steadily toward the Gulf, as it had for thousands of years, and would for thousands more. Inside that vast sweep of time and land, Tobias and Theresa had carved out their own small space of happiness. They had honored the dead and celebrated the living. They had worked hard and loved deeply, and raised a family that would carry their values forward long after they were gone. As they finally rose to go inside for supper, Tobias paused at the door and looked back at the darkened land. He thought about Thomas, buried under the oak tree behind the house, and sent a silent thank you to his brother. "Thank you for bringing her here. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for every blessing that came from your loss." Then he followed Theresa inside, to the warm light and the smell of food cooking and the sound of Grace humming as she worked. He followed her into the life they had built together, the life that had started with a fresh grave and a desperate promise, and had bloomed into more than either of them could have dreamed. Tobias lived to 83, passing peacefully in his sleep with Theresa beside him. The whole county came to his funeral, testament to the respect and affection he had earned over a lifetime of honest dealing and hard work. He was buried next to Thomas under the oak tree, the two brothers together again at last. Theresa lived another 7 years, dying at 81 surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still managing to offer advice on ranch operations and family matters right up to her final days. In her last moments, she smiled and whispered Tobias's name, and those present said she looked like a young bride again, radiant with love. They buried her between Tobias and Thomas, 3 graves under the oak tree marking the beginning of everything the Whitmore family had become. The ranch continued to prosper through the generations, always remaining in family hands, a testament to the foundation Tobias and Theresa had built. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was right, ranch hands swore they could hear singing coming from the direction of the oak tree. Not one voice but 3, harmonizing in the way family does, the sound carrying across the land like a blessing. Old Miguel, who lived to 96, always insisted it was Thomas's voice he heard, finally singing again, joined now by the brother and the bride who had honored his memory by building a love story for the ages. The story of Tobias and Theresa became family legend, told and retold through the generations. The bride who arrived to find a grave, the cowboy brother who honored a promise, the love that grew from duty and grief into something beautiful and lasting. It was a story about loss and redemption, about keeping your word even when it cost you everything, about finding love in the most unexpected places. But most of all, it was a story about 2 people who chose each other, day after day, year after year, building a life together one decision at a time. From that first awkward conversation by Thomas's grave to their final days on the ranch they had built together, Tobias and Theresa had shown what it meant to truly partner with someone, to honor not just the promises you make, but the person you make them to. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch, working the land and raising cattle just as Tobias and Theresa did over a century ago. The old ranch house has been added onto and modernized, but the bones of it remain the same. And the porch where Tobias and Theresa spent so many evenings is preserved as it was, a sacred space where the family gathers for important moments. On the wall inside hangs a portrait of them, painted when they were in their 50s. Tobias stands behind Theresa's chair, his hand on her shoulder, both of them looking directly at the viewer with expressions of quiet contentment. Beneath it is a brass plaque that reads, "Tobias and Theresa Whitmore." He honored his brother's promise and found a love that built a legacy. Every year on their wedding anniversary, the family gathers at the ranch for a celebration. They tell the old stories, raise toasts to the couple who started it all, and remind the youngest generation where they come from. The story has been embellished over the years, some details lost and others added, but the core remains true. A woman arrived to find a grave instead of a groom. A man offered to honor his dead brother's promises. From that unlikely beginning grew a love story that spanned decades and generations, proving that the best things in life often come from the hardest moments, and that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones we never planned for. The 3 graves under the oak tree remain well tended, always decorated with fresh wildflowers. Thomas, who dreamed of having a family on this land. Tobias, who honored his brother's word and found his own happiness. And Theresa, who took a chance on a grieving cowboy and built a dynasty with him. 3 lives, intertwined by fate and choice and the enduring power of promises kept. 3 graves under an oak tree in Del Rio, Texas, marking the foundation of a family that continues to thrive. Proof that love and honor and steadfast commitment can create something that lasts forever. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right across the Texas plains, you can almost hear them still. Thomas singing, Tobias's rough voice joining in, and Theresa's laughter carrying over it all, the sound of a family complete at last, together in the land they loved and the legacy they built.